This is the Triage Method podcast, Q&A edition part 2. Most of you will hopefully have watched or listened to part 1 of the Q&A. If not, go back and listen to it. And in this episode, we're basically going to get back to some of the questions that we didn't get through and answer the rest of them. So I think we'll just get right in and skip the straight in, no kissing. So the first question is quite a good question, one that we've addressed before, but one that I think is important, especially... I was going to say especially for guys, but actually it's just as much of a problem for girls, and I think it's probably not even mentioned in the for female, women, ladies, whatever you prefer. But the question is basically how to overcome the psychological barrier to weight gain and consuming more calorie-dense foods. So I suppose the background context here, because I know the individual, I like the individual, great guy. The background context here is someone who has a hypertrophy goal, so that is a goal, like they want to build muscle, they want to get stronger, so they want to make progress that's specific to resistance training, but they've got that barrier of wanting to maintain what I would consider to be a very, very low level of body fat, like a level of body fat that you probably don't want to be trying to maintain if you're trying to optimize your progress. So clearly in this case, there's kind of two conflicting things like working against each other, where you're trying to stay really lean, but you're also trying to fuel the training process. And sometimes that can be just fine, because most people do tend to, over time, spontaneously overconsume at least a little bit. You know, like they might think they're at maintenance, but maybe they're 100 or 200 calories over, and the weight creeps up over time. But
1 or 2 calories, are you serious?
1 or 200 calories. But if you're at 60 kilos and you've been there for 2 years, like... You're really hampering your progress then. So what we...
Unless you're at your genetic...
Yeah, unless you're your limit, but we're assuming that you're not if you're in that position. Yeah. So in terms of the problems here, problem number 1, as we said, you're not giving your body the fuel that it actually requires to be able to fuel the training process and build the new tissue that you want. And I think that's a real simple thing to understand, as in if you were trying to build a building and you literally do not have any more bricks remaining and you want to build the remaining floors, how are you going to do that? It's impossible. In the case that you have lots of extra body fat, okay, there's some resources that can be kind of relocated in some cases at maintenance, but if you're already at a low body fat, there's literally no way of you building muscle unless you're over consuming calories, even by a little bit, because where exactly is the energy to synthesize those proteins going to come from? It's just not there.
Yeah, it's not. If you don't have it in body fat, the only other place is muscle, really. So you end up in a situation where it's you're stealing from Peter to pay Paul, where it's okay, I stole some, protein from my fucking calf, converted it to glucose or whatever was needed, and put it towards fucking my chest, and then the next workout it's you do the exact opposite. It's that's the only other store that you have that could potentially go anywhere. So you end up in a net same.
Yeah. So basically you're going to be the same for a long period of time. And the thing is, I think that's acceptable in a lot of cases. If your goal is not to build muscle, you're just trying to improve performance or enjoy the training process, totally fine. You don't need to have a muscle building goal. But when you do need to, adhere to the things that are required for you to actually move forward, because building muscle is not easy, and you do definitely need to have the energy substrates available to undertake that process. So the next thing from there is then to discuss why this would be a psychological barrier. The reason most of the time this would be a barrier for people is because they don't want to accept the extra body fat that comes with gaining muscle. And maybe that's because they just really enjoy the aesthetic side of lifting. Sometimes it's because they have certain obligations, formal or informal, like fitness models, for example, they often have to stay lean. But other than that, I think an underappreciated thing is that if you're the training person, the fitness guy or girl in your group, and suddenly you're a little bit out of shape, as in you gain a little bit of body fat, you don't quite have the definition that you used to, the veins on your arms, whatever. If you don't have those characteristics anymore, then you may feel like you're actually losing a little bit of a part of your identity, I think. So that could be a barrier for people. So they're the types of things that you have to think about to start with, to wrestle with them, and then to take small steps in the direction that you want to go. So the first step, from my perspective, would be to, one, recognize that a little bit of body fat gain is not going to be the biggest deal in the world, and it's not just going to happen overnight either. As in, if you're smart with your nutrition, it's going to be a gradual change. So if I was coaching an individual like this, I would not be saying like, right, let's gain 2 kilos a month, because that transition is too significant and it's going to be like a problem for that person. So in this case, you might want to actually employ a more conservative approach to weight gain, where you're saying, right, maybe we'll max out at about 1 kilo a month. Like most people, if you gain 1 kilo in the next month, you'd barely notice it, So you want to start off with a conservative surplus and just get into that process. And you'll start to notice there are certain benefits to it. Like you have more fuel for your training. You won't have as many days where you're feeling low in energy or under-recovered, because you've got that surplus more often. And then over time, you'll begin to undertake the process of accepting a little bit more body fat. And it's not going to be a linear process either, in that it's quite difficult. There'll be days where you'll wake up when you've gained 4 kilos and you're like, oh God, I'm so out of shape. But then you just take a step back and you kind of push on for another few days, and then you're like, all right, actually, I see the benefits here. And the key thing to remember is that the grass is always greener on the other side. Like one of my clients just said that to me this week. They said they heard us discuss it on the podcast, and now they realize, because, when she was dieting and she was losing weight, she was like, oh, I can't wait to be in a surplus. I'm so excited to feel great again. And then when you're in a surplus, you're like, oh, I can't wait to be dieting again, because I don't feel the best, or maybe I'm farting more because I'm consuming more food, or
like a little bit of body fat.
Yeah, a little bit of body fat, a little bit of bloating.
So many calories.
Yeah, like even for me, like one of the things I always notice, like when I started gain weight or if I'm in a surplus for a while, I kind of miss that little bit of hunger. Like we have talked about it many times, where I just feel more productive when I've got that little bit of hunger. It's like you're always focused on other tasks.
And there's a little bit more structure to your day when you're kind of dieting, because you're like, oh, well, I know I need to eat now soon, or there's that, like, I have to kind of plan that a little bit more. Whereas you have a bit more you just have more freedom when you're bulking or you're eating in a surplus. You're kind of like, it's not playing on your mind as much, and that kind of does take away from the focusing side of things, where you're like, okay, well, I know I have to have lunch at like 12 because I'm going to be hungry otherwise, and I'm not going to be able to focus on my work. So it gives your day more structure.
Yeah, so I think, and then the other thing I think that is a bit more harsh, but you have to say it to yourself, like, if you're not willing to overeat, like if you're not willing to consume sufficient calories to fuel your goal, like, why are you training? And that's not to say there's no benefit to it, but for example, like if you are just trying to maintain your physique, you don't need to train that hard. As in, like, yeah, you need to show up at the gym a few times a week, you need to do a bit, but it's very easy to maintain your physique. To progress your physique, you have to train, much harder generally. There's generally, like, you have to push things much further to gain something than to actually maintain it. So if you're going to the gym and you're putting in all of the effort that's required for you to progress and to gain muscle, but you're not fueling it, then you may as well be training a lot easier. As in, your efforts are not producing any sort of meaningful results. Like, yeah, you might have a couple of kilos of strength gain here and there. There might be a psychological benefit. Like, gaining muscle is not the only reason to train. It's still beneficial for your health. But if that's the outcome you're looking for, muscle gain, then I'd really be questioning why I'm showing up to the gym every day, investing so much of my time and effort, if I'm not doing something that is a relatively simple behavior change, like the addition of 200 or 300 calories, to try and facilitate the outcomes that I want.
Yeah, and with that, like, you're coming at it from the perspective of the actual weight gain is itself, right? Yeah. And you can kind of look at it from that perspective, but you can also do it the opposite and focus on the actual habits themselves, right? So, like, rather than being very outcome orientated, which obviously has its benefits, because that's the outcome you want to influence, like actually keeping track of it can be quite beneficial. But taking a step back, this is especially important for females or people with, a history of some sort of disordered eating around food, where they get this hyper focus on the scale weight. If they start seeing that go up, they're like, I'm out of control, I need to regain control of my diet, and that generally means like cutting calories. But like stepping away from the scales and going, I'm actually not going to focus on that too much, maybe I do step on it once a month just to kind of reassure myself, or whatever. Or if you can do it, impartially step on it daily, weekly, whatever it is. But taking that step back from that actual scale itself, so you're not thinking like, oh no, if I'm over 65 kilos, I'm obese. Taking that step back and actually just focusing on the habits themselves. Like, you could approach this and be like, I find it really hard to, gain weight because I get all these negative thoughts where I'm like, oh no, I'm going to get fat. I'm not willing to accept all this extra body fat or whatever it is that's actually holding you back from doing this. You could just engage with the process itself, but in a very minimal way. For example, you could just be like, right, I know my maintenance is 2,500, right? And that's what you're eating. And you're like, this is where I'm staying to maintain my physique. And if I go higher than that, I kind of feel like I'm losing control. You could just take this. Like I always look at, like, how do you eat an elephant, like one bite at a time, So you could literally just add 50 calories to your day, right? And once, like, that's so inconsequential. Like that's literally like you'll probably upregulate some fucking heat production in your body that you'll actually stay at the same weight.
Yeah.
But just that act of going, okay, I'm actually taking one step, even if it's an inconsequential step. It is a step in the direction that you want to move, right? And then once you feel comfortable with that, you've done that, and you're like, there wasn't actually that much of a difference. I felt maybe a little bit more energetic, but there wasn't a huge difference. You go, okay, can I go for 100 calories? And again, this might take place over a couple of months. I'm not saying that this is gonna sort you out in the next week. Like again, like looking at that longer time frame. If you're like, look, I want to build muscle over time. Like we could say roughly a 300 calorie surplus is a good place to be like, I'm going to maximize muscle gain and minimize, fat gain, right? So if you can get closer to that, perfect. But again, that can be taken over a number of months, a number of years to slowly get up to that. Now, obviously, in that process, you are going to be gaining muscle, gaining weight, so that number is going to change itself. But taking those smaller steps and just looking at the habits that are needed to influence the end outcome rather than actually tracking the end outcome itself, that can be a very beneficial approach if you are stuck in that mindset of the outcome itself is changing, even if it is what you say you want. Once you see it written down on the scale, you're like, oh no, I'm abort this mission. We're going back. We're back in the diet. Seeing or doing habits that lead to that outcome, but not actually tracking that outcome, can be very beneficial. And also, to an extent, it's a little bit easier to actually just go, okay, well, I'm just going to eat more, because essentially that's what needs to be done, right? You need to eat more, right? It doesn't matter how much the magnitude of that. Obviously, it does matter in terms of the proportion you're going to gain as fat versus muscle and all that stuff. But ultimately, what you need to do is eat more. So what can you do as an individual throughout your day that allows you, to facilitates you to actually do that, And that could be something as simple as, I'm going to just have 50 extra calories per day. Or it could be something as simple as, like, some people find that they're very restricted or restrictive in their food selection. And rather than going like, oh, you have to eat, quote unquote, bulking foods or whatever, it's like, no, I'm actually just going to eat a little bit more of what I haven't eaten. You're like, I have 50 grams of oats. Can we just bump that up to 60, 70? Like what? Can we do these small things, these small habits that'll lead to the outcome actually being influenced over time? Now, obviously, that's not, you still have to eventually pay the piper, and you have to deal with stepping on the scales one day and you're 65 kilos. That still doesn't sort that issue, but it will actually give you some ability to move forward with your goals. But again, you do have to eventually confront your demons and actually, this is one of the situations where I'm like, like it probably is a good idea just to get psychological help. Like go to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, whatever one is the more appropriate for your given situation, and actually have them talk through the issues with you. Is it something that it's like, okay, well, actually you have a very low confidence in yourself, and like you have identified yourself as the fitness guy, girl, whatever, and this has given you an identity, and that's what you needed. You needed that shield, you needed that barrier to the world. You're still going to have to deal with those issues, like me saying, oh, I add 50 calories. It's not going to deal with that, Or again, like you could have come from a background of disordered eating and being like, okay, well, this is how I get control in my life, because the rest of my life there's so little control. My family broke up when I was very young. I was fucking sexually abused or whatever it is, and you turn to like this disordered eating to kind of cope with that. That could be both sides of the coin, where it's like, you just medicate with food and you just, you're obese as a result, or you're kind of control food because you're like, I need to have control in my life because I don't have control in these other aspects of my life, and as a result, you eat very, very little calories because you're like, oh, every food has to be very clean, and you essentially have these disordered thoughts around food, and again, that goes both ways, the obese front and the underweight front. But yeah, like for some people, you actually will need to get like psychological help, so like don't be afraid to do that, because it's really weird in the fitness industry. We do all these things that, or rather we say all these things, well, some people say all these things, but then don't actually put into practice those things themselves. Like people will say like, oh yeah, I'm really interested in mental health, and they'll talk about it from a certain perspective, and they'll never actually address the fact that they have mental health issues around food. They use food as a medication. Like they use it to, when they're sad, they're like, oh, I overeat. It's like, do you not see the connection here? You're talking about this mental health stuff over here, talking about like depression and all that stuff, and it's like, you're not actually dealing with the demon or the fucking skeleton in your closet that will actually help you the most, because obviously it's hard. Like no one likes, like inherently likes talking about this stuff where it's like, oh yeah, let's sit down and actually talk about my deepest, darkest secrets and my deepest, darkest weaknesses and insecurities. Who the fuck wants to talk about that? No one, So for a lot of individuals, like that's probably going to get them more results than me going, oh yeah, 50 calorie surplus, start there and slowly add over time, Like obviously that's an approach, and again, these don't have to be done separately, like they can be done together, But yeah, for a lot of people, like actually, it doesn't actually have to be a psychologist, psychiatrist, or whatever, like, but sometimes just talking and putting verbalizing your thoughts helps you actually really get down to the crux of the issue. Because like, if you think about like human cognition, like we essentially think in dialogue, like you actually have to verbalize your thoughts. So like there is like theories out there that, humans, like the reason we think in words, is rather what I'm trying to say, is because we are a very communicating species. Like we're a very verbal species. That's how we transmit thoughts. That's how we transmit information. It's the written word, the verbal word. Like obviously there is these like non-verbal cues, like you can see my face and my hand movement and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, if we do use speech or language to communicate ideas, and there is a thought process that it's like, that's actually how the human brain evolved, and this is why people find when they actually try to verbalize their ideas, they're much better at actually putting them in an understandable form, even for themselves. Like you might have ideas, but like yourself, like you think of like a round ball, like you have all of these ideas about what that means, and when I said that, you thought of a color, you thought of maybe patterns on it, you thought of different shapes, the sizes, like, but the only way you can actually communicate that is if you verbalize it, And if you remember in the last episode, we were talking about like the empathy stuff when we're talking about the physiotherapists, that it's the same thing. It's like I don't know what you're thinking. Like I don't, like, no one can read minds, no one, So you have to be able to communicate that, So that's the same with your emotions and all the stuff around food. Like if you're able to communicate that and actually verbalize what you are thinking, that not only helps other people understand what you're thinking, but it actually helps you as an individual understand what you're thinking. Because again, like you have all these thoughts, like non-verbal thoughts, and they're very hard to put into words. But if you're actually able to verbalize them, you're actually able to, we'll say, control them. And if you think back to the episode we did ages ago, like, words are magic, like that one, especially, we go a little bit deeper into this, like, and I don't want to sound like all woo-woo or whatever, but it's like, they really are. It's like the way we use words is a metaphor, or I don't even know if metaphor is the right word. It is a representation of our reality, and this goes down to the very words that we choose to express. Now, again, like a lot of people overblow the importance of that. They're like, oh, don't say negative words because they'll harm your psyche or whatever. It's like, that's not, well, that would be my opinion, a misrepresentation of this thought process. But you may need to just talk to someone and actually have an impartial ear, not even like trying to give you information, not even trying to guide you, but just actually let you verbalize and bounce your thoughts off them so that you're like, I actually have come to realize because of this conversation that the reason I struggle with food is because I've always been the one that got bullied because of whatever, and I use food as a comfort. Or maybe you were overweight as a child and you got bullied because of that, and now you have to be the shredded individual, where it's like, oh, I don't want to ever feel weak like I felt then. Like, people do this in the fitness industry on the other side as well. Like, guys got bullied as kids or whatever, and they're like, I have to create this armor, I have to be big and strong so that no one can hurt me, and I had to put this facade on. I'm fucking massive, bro. And again, it goes that way. So like, if you actually take that step back and actually deal with these emotional underpinnings, like, you actually lead a much more enriched life, because you actually understand yourself, and also it allows you to deal with these issues that are coming up in your life, rather than just going like, oh, I need a protocol to deal with this, rather than actually like looking under the hood and going, okay, this is the underlying like first principle stuff, that if we actually understand this stuff and we're actually able to deal with the root cause, we don't actually get all these other offshoots that have been occurring in my life, and I can be a much more loving person, family member, community member, and contribute to society in a much more meaningful way then. But that's something that some people will hear that and go, yeah, no, that's actually what I really need to do. I need to go out, I'm going to find the best psychologist, psychiatrist, or friend, family member, whatever, and actually talk through this stuff and deal with this stuff, while some other people are going to read that or listen to that and go, this is fucking woo-woo bullshit. Psychology doesn't make... I think psychology is fake anyway, but psychology, isn't going to help. Psychiatrist isn't going to help. They're just a shrink. They're not going to be able to fucking do anything. So I'm just going to go back to binge restrict cycles and yo-yo dieting.
Yeah, so I think in summary, like, if you're finding yourself asking this question where you want to overcome a quote-unquote psychological barrier to gaining weight and engaging in the practices that are required, you really first have to ask yourself, like, what brought you to the point of asking this question? Because, like, if you're someone who, like, let's say you just did a 12-week fat loss phase, you enjoyed the feeling of being lean, and now you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to gain weight, like, that's fine. Like, realistically, you need to kind of engage with the process, that's fine. But if you're someone on the other side of the spectrum where you've always struggled with body image issues, you struggle with binging and restricting, and like the constant like chronic dieting, you always want to be leaner, and you struggle with the idea of ever having a large meal, like, if you've got those more kind of things you might consider to be psychopathological or disorder eating or whatever, they're the types of things you want to deal with a professional, as opposed to just trying to confirm your own bias by getting our answer. Because I think that's what happens with a lot of times people are struggling with disordered eating. They try to find a way that an answer that can confirm the behavior that they're going to engage in anyway. For example, something like engaging in a new exercise program that just happens to burn loads of calories, like CrossFit, for example, or taking up running. I've seen that in some individuals where people will veer towards those activities because they're more energetically costly, because it justifies the behavior of eating more without gaining weight. And I think, again, they're the types of conversations you need to at least have with yourself and potentially with a professional, depending on how much of an impact that's having on your life and your ability to engage beyond just the training and nutrition environment, if you will.
Yeah, everything else.
Sweet. Next question kind of ties in quite closely here, so we'll just touch on that as well. That's, how do you find the balance between meeting friends for food and drinks and hitting weight loss goals? So this is definitely a problem for a lot of people, like probably all of our clients. Like I would say, like the vast majority at least. It's something that we still obviously would deal with. It's something you can plan for, but it's just a reality of being an everyday person. As in, like, if you're a bodybuilder, like, bodybuilders tend to be like, oh, it doesn't matter, friends don't matter, won't meet up with my friends. Or I've even known like a good few guys to have eaten meals in Tupperware in the bathroom of a restaurant while going out for dinner. So, like, you probably don't want to be that person. Like, I think we can all agree that most people listening to this podcast probably don't want to start adopting behaviors like that. But firstly, I guess what you should recognize is that it's actually very practical and somewhat easy, at least in theory, to make this work. You can still go out and meet your friends once a week, have a drink or two, have a meal, and hit your weight loss goals. Like, in theory, it's totally fine. In practice, it's a little bit more difficult for people, because what tends to happen a lot of the time is people are like, oh yeah, I'm going to go out, but they go out on Friday night, they drink way more than they initially planned, and they go over their calories that day, they wake up the next day on Saturday, they overconsume calories all that day, because suddenly your goals are not in the same place, especially if you're with individuals who, you know, do not have the same goals as you, and it can kind of spiral out of control for the weekend. That tends to be what happens in a lot of cases. So for me, it's about being very honest with yourself in terms of like, right, what are my goals and what trade-offs am I willing to accept? Like for me, I have a drink every now and then, and but I'm not going to be having like 6 or 8 pints. Like that's not going to happen the vast majority of the time. I'm not going to be having 6 or 8 pints, and I'm not going to go out and like have a 4-course meal on top of that, especially if I was trying to lose weight. Like that just generally wouldn't be what I do, because I'm willing to accept the trade-off of not getting pissed drunk and not having 3 desserts in order to achieve my goals. So that's the first thing, is to recognize the trade-offs you're willing to accept and the ones you're not willing to accept. Like if you're not willing to accept the trade-off of like not being able to get pissed drunk twice a week, like I'd argue that like that's something that's just like, it's almost non-negotiable. As in, you probably can't make that work.
But like this like, again, even if you were like, that's what I need to do for my social life, whatever, then you have to realize that the trade-off is that the rest of your diet is going to be extremely restrictive, you know? And like, again, is it optimal? Fuck no, right? But again, it's a trade-off conversation. You're saying it's like, okay, well, I need to do this because this is just who I am. This is just my society, my culture, whatever the fuck, you know? I need to do this. Then you just have to realize that the trade-off is that the rest of your diet is going to be extremely restrictive, and you have to be okay with that.
Yep.
You know? That, again, not optimal, but that's the trade-off you have put on yourself, you know? So, it's like off.
Yeah, it's fine.
So this is the thing that, like ultimately, I think it's just not an issue.
Yeah,
you know? Like it's so not an issue once you actually understand what you're trying to achieve and how to diet. And that's obviously very high and mighty of me to say, be like, oh, it's just fucking not an issue, get on with it. But that's not what I actually mean. What I actually mean is, if you understand the underpinnings of dieting as a whole, like this just becomes a non-issue. You know, it's like you need to stay within your calories or around your calories to achieve your goals. That's both on a weekly and a monthly schedule. Now, we've talked about it before, the issues with kind of like, oh, well, I'm going to have a weekly deficit and trying to keep track of that. But it is essentially one method of going about it, where you're like, I'm going to eat a little bit less earlier in the week to account for going out later in the week, you know. And again, there's a potential there for these kind of binge restrict cycles. And also you can do stuff like intermittent fasting, you know, earlier in the day you don't eat as much and then go out. There's all these, they're all protocols, so that's not the actual way you deal with it. The way you deal with it is you look at things from a calorie perspective and you go, this is going to be the calories that allow me to still move forward with my goals, you know? How you go about dealing with that, that's a protocol. That's a specific to the actual situation that's presented in front of you, right? But then before even the calories thing, you have to go, what are the goals related to this? Like, what are my actual priorities, like we've talked about before? And once you understand them, you can go, okay, well, my priorities are actually, I want to go to the gym to better my life and, you know, be a better husband, father, fucking community member, whatever the fuck. And I'm actually just ignoring all those actual goals because I'm going to the gym and trying to eat a certain way. You know, it's like you've actually become the enemy you wished to avoid. You know, you become what you most fear. So you have to be very, very clear on your goals and what you're trying to achieve. And again, like you have to be willing to be like, okay, well, this is actually taking a step back from my immediate goals of fat loss or whatever, but it actually supports my long-term goals of being a good family member or being a valued member of my community or whatever it is that you're actually trying to achieve. And then ultimately, if you look at it, it's like we live in a world of abundance where the real issue people have or the more common issue people have is the paradox of choice rather than being limited. You know, like there's too many choices available rather than having too little choices available. You know, and again, that's an issue into itself. But in this context, it actually gives you so much freedom. You know, like I don't see, like you can go to any restaurant. I don't care if it is literally like Southern fried chicken, like proper the Louisiana's best fucking Southern fried chicken house. You know, you can still order something from the menu that will fit to your goals, or eat to a way that fits to your goals. You know, like if you're like, I only have 600 calories available to this meal, or you can eat in that manner. You can eat something that will fit into that 600 calories. You know, so ultimately, I'm like, you have so many choices available to you. You just need to make better choices where they are available, and just forget about it. It's a non-issue. You know, if you're going out and you're like, I need to socialize twice per week to keep my social circle healthy, then again, you accept some trade-offs. You're like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to eat the fucking nachos that they all eat while we watch the game, but we can have the 3 pints or whatever that I wanted to have with them, you know? So again, like, it's just make better choices where they're available. Understand that the underlying principles that are actually guiding your fat loss, weight gain, whatever, are calories and yes, macronutrients as well. But again, once you understand that, it's like, okay, well, like, there's so many ways of going about this. Like, it's just not an issue. Just make better choices. And again, I'm not trying to be like high and mighty on that. It's like this is one of the things that you learn as you get better at all this stuff. Like, this is what people are saying. Like they say, like, oh, intuitive eating. It's like, yeah, you're able to intuitively eat because you've learned all these things. You've learned all these habits. You've adapted all these habits to your lifestyle, and you actually understand the variables that go into this, so that you can intuitively eat and stay on track. Whereas if you're coming from this and you've never tracked your calories, like this, for most people, I just recommend tracking your calories, because this gives you so much freedom ultimately. Like, yes, it requires discipline initially to track your calories and, you know, learn all the stuff around that to actually get into being able to do that successfully. But it ultimately gives you so much freedom. Like, I like people to track calories 2 to 5 years, you know, if possible. Some people are going to be able to be like, okay, cool, after 3 months, I just fucking get this. I know exactly, I eat roughly the same foods. They're like 12 weeks later, they're like, this shit is easy. Whereas the majority of people, it takes a little bit longer. They're like, okay, you know, I eat varied food here and there. I eat out some mornings, and it's all over the place, you know, because life is messy. And for them, it's like, okay, well, let's use MyFitnessPal or whatever app you want and get a better understanding of calories, what that meal looks like, what the calorie load of that meal is or is likely to be. Get good at like eyeballing your food, and then you can move to this more kind of what everyone kind of wants to move toward, this intuitive style of dieting where it's like you can just manage your nutrition very easily, and you can go out and it's no big issue. It's like, yeah, I know roughly what this meal looks like in terms of overall calories. I know how to order from the menu so that I can choose better things to keep me on track with my goals. I know how to, I basically know how to eat to stay on track with my goals. And it just takes time. It just takes effort and time to actually be able to do that. And again, like, this is something that people aren't necessarily willing to do, because again, I'm just saying, you're probably going to track calories for 2 to 5 years, and then you'll be able to do this. And that's not sexy. That's not, here's fucking 5 tricks that are going to help you fucking succeed in your ability to socialize and eat out with friends, you know?
Yeah. And the only other thing I would say is, like, we talked about other trade-offs, but another trade-off is just like most people don't have a weight loss deadline, so if you have a setback, like, that's fine. It seems like you're allowed to accept it. Like, a case example of this where you'd have two different contexts would be my personal case last weekend. So last weekend I went home to Kerry, and like Laura was after, you know, booking a hotel in Sneem for us, so we were going to be going out for dinner. We wanted to go to this pancake place on the way home to Killarney on Saturday, and then my family, like, I hadn't seen my family in weeks, and we were booking like a meal with my cousins and stuff, and we were all going out together for the first time in however long. So there was all these different things piling on top of each other.
So what you did was you cooked your food beforehand, put it in Tupperware, and only ate that. Yeah.
Well, honestly, like,
of course.
Well, like, because this is actually a good example, because it's a rare one as well, where, like, tomorrow I have to, like, weigh in at a particular weight, as in I pretty much have to be 74 kilos and that's it. So I knew that going into last weekend, right, Gary, you've got a deadline. Are you willing to accept the trade-off of having to, quote-unquote, suffer more next week, because you're going to have to eat way less, if you do go out on Friday and Saturday with your family and with Laura, and it's like, is that a trade-off you're willing to accept? And I was like, yeah, that's something that I'm willing to accept. So like next week's going to be tougher, but yeah, it's going to be worth it because I actually want to go out with my family and stuff, and I don't want to be the person that is like, oh, I can't go, even though they go out for my graduation. So like that for me was like a trade-off I was willing to accept. So then when it came to Monday morning and Tuesday and Wednesday, and I was having lower calories and my meals were smaller, I was like, oh, that's fine because it's worth it, and I know where I have to be on Sunday. Now, if I didn't have a weigh-in tomorrow, would I have restricted myself this week? No, probably not. And definitely not to the same degree, because it just wouldn't have been as much of a problem. As in, if I gained a kilo last week that I had lost the week before, like, who cares? Like, it's pretty irrelevant. As in, like, no one in the general population has a deadline for a weight loss goal. Like, it doesn't matter if you lose a kilo this week or if you lose it in the next 2 weeks, because it's about the process of continuing to move forward over time. So I would worry more about where I am month to month if I'm trying to lose weight than week to week, because like a great weekend with your friends could be a very worthwhile trade-off to not lose any weight that week. Like that's totally fine. But if you direct all of your attention towards the fact that you didn't lose weight, it's going to be a negative experience. If you direct all of your attention towards the fact that, oh, you actually had a break from your diet, it was great, you saw your friends, it's going to be a positive experience. You do have to frame things in that way and be willing to accept some setbacks along the way.
I agree.
That's fair. This is a question a bit different to the other one, so I think we should answer this. How to deal with clients who do not follow your style of coaching? Late check-ins, low communication, etc. Fire them, obviously. That would be my first instinct, like, get out of here. No, in all seriousness, like, the first thing I always do when I encounter any time I feel like that, where I'm like, oh, I don't know if this person is a good fit or if they're engaging in the process in the way that I'd like, I think, right, that it's far more likely that is my fault. As in, like, what can I do to either change the process, inform the person as to how the process works, or maybe reach out to the person and try to get them involved, and make sure they feel comfortable with it. Because, like, that's what taking ownership of, like, your service and your job is about, like, assuming that there's a problem with what you're doing first and that you take the responsibility, as opposed to assuming it's the person who's paying for the service. Because, like, I've had that come up many a time where a client has been like, they haven't sent me videos through WhatsApp for a number of weeks, in the end of all my emails, I'm always like, oh yeah, so, if you have any videos this week, like, feel free to send them my way. And, it's kind of just at the end of the email. And I had a client say to me one time, they were like, oh, I just I wasn't really sure if I should send the videos or if it was something that was kind of just like, if I really needed to. And then once it was explained to them that, like, oh no, this is actually something that's really valuable for me as a coach and for you, and that's a key part of the process, that, like, I'm happy for you to do it daily, then they're like, oh, great, now I can engage with the service. Same with check-ins. People will say, oh, I saw that you were, because especially if people follow you online, they might be like, I saw that you were away for the weekend, you were away on Friday with your girlfriend, so I didn't want to send you a check-in on Friday, I didn't want to bother you. Because again, like, you have to assume that there's something on their end that they might actually be doing something considerate. So they're the types of things that I would try and clarify first, make it clear that, like, right, this is when check-ins are, I have no problem with you sending it, if there is a delay, I might be a bit delayed, and I'm sorry about that, it won't happen often, or, if it's WhatsApp contact, make it clear that it's beneficial for you, that it's part of the service, and yeah, I guess play around with your own communication style, your own, informing of people, before you assume that they just, like, are not invested in the service. Because realistically, if they've chosen you as a coach, they've invested their money, they probably want to get something out of it, so I would take that as my responsibility, first and foremost.
Yeah, like, I think it is ultimately, you just need to communicate.
Yeah.
Whatever way that actually looks like for you as a coach yourself, you need to reach out to that person, explain to them, late check-ins. It's like, look, this is the reason I need to have check-ins on these days. Like, I do my check-ins, like, I get my clients to send them on a Friday, Saturday, so I do them on a Saturday, Sunday, right? And some people might check in on a Sunday, but they'll clear that with me first. Or they might check in on a Sunday and not realise that kind of throws my process out the window, or they'll check in on Monday or Tuesday, And it's like, I just need to communicate better with them and be like, this this is why it's so important to do it on a Friday, Saturday, because, you know, and now it takes me, if you send it on a Monday, I might not get back to you till a Wednesday or maybe even a Thursday. You know, I've got other things going on as well. So you get a lower quality service. Like, it's not necessarily hassle for me because, like, I'll eventually get to the email, but it's a hassle for you because now, you know, you didn't get your program updated, or, you know, you had a burning issue, you're going out for dinner on whatever day, and it's like, it's a disservice for them. So, you know, they may not know that this is your schedule. You do your check-ins, you reply to check-ins or whatever on the Saturday, Sunday, or whatever it is, you know. So they didn't realize that that's why that is important to do, you know. That's a communication issue. You need to just tell them. You need to actually communicate with them. Same way, like you're saying with the sending you videos. They might be like, oh, I know you mentioned that, but I haven't done it because I'm a bit scared of it, you know. And it's like, you actually need to communicate with them and explain, this is why I need you to send me videos. Like, this is why this is actually a very valuable part of the service, that, you know, if you don't do it, it's like, I can only assume that you're doing everything correctly, you know. So it actually behooves you so much better to be like, if you get your videos to me, we can actually dial in your technique, and then you can actually progress quicker in a more safe manner, you know. It's like, they might not just understand that. So it just comes down to a communication thing where it's like, you have to treat these like they're an individual, and it's like again, like, I just treat everyone like they're retarded. Like, I'm going to explain, like, I treat myself like I'm retarded, you know? I was like, I'm just going to explain everything to you, ideally in the first email, where it's like, here's all our rundown, here's my mobile phone number, you know, WhatsApp me, like, talk them through the entire process. Here's why you check in, here's when I'm available, here's what you're going to get from this service. Like, do a big email like that. And then you'll see that people read through that and they pick up different things from that themselves. So they may forget a certain aspect, or they may not engage with a certain aspect. That's you as a coach. You have to be like, this is why this aspect is important. Or, you know, or either remind them, or, you know, ensure that what they read in that initial email was what they actually took away from that initial email, you know? So it just comes down to communication. Like, it shouldn't ultimately be an issue if you just communicate. You know, there's going to obviously be people that are just not a good fit. They're just like, look, I didn't engage with the process. I just didn't like the way we communicated. I didn't like this. I didn't know that this was the way the coaching went, or whatever. Like, there's always going to be individuals. Like, you can't please everyone, you know? But again, like I said, you have to initially assume that it's your fault, you know, and potentially modify things for that individual. Like, I know I have one or two clients that check in. One of them checks in late on a Sunday, and one of them checks in on a Monday, because that fits their schedule, you know, and I'm like, that's perfectly fine. You know, they work on Saturday, Sunday, you know, so they've got other stuff going on that's like, they can't really sit down and actually do the check-in. And I'm like, that's fine. I know I have to allocate time on a Monday to do their check-ins, you know? Like, they know that. I know that their check-in is going to be there. It's consistent all the time. They're like, this is the time I'll check in. I'm sorry that it's outside of your check-in window, but, you know, we'll deal with it, you know? And that's perfectly fine because they've communicated with me, right? And that makes my life so much easier. So you have to always assume that, again, well, if I communicate with the other individuals that aren't engaging, can I make their life easier and make this more sustainable for them, make them more, or make them enjoy the process more, you know?
Yeah, and the only final thing there as well is that, like, different clients require different levels of communication, and I think that's really, really important to recognize, because there's been times where, like, I've been thinking through all this stuff, and I've killed myself thinking, like, oh, like, why isn't this person contacting me? Like, am I doing a good job or whatever? But then it comes to the end, and they're like, firstly, they met all their goals, they made great progress, and they're like, Gary, I got so much from this service, you know, I learned so much from you, from the things you were saying. And you just don't know what people are actually taking in. Like, you don't know who requires what level of communication. As in, if someone is not understanding something, they're not executing the program in the way that you'd like, and they're not moving forward in terms of progress, like, that's clearly a person that would benefit from you communicating in a different way, modifying communication, or communicating with you regularly. However, if it is someone that's like, they're losing a kilo a week, that's their goal, their weights are going up, they're clearly taking on board everything, and they're saying, got it, gonna execute, and each week their check-in is like, did everything required this week, thanks very much, question or two here, and talk to you next week. Like, at the end of the day, that's what people pay for. Like, they pay for results, they pay for, like, maybe learning things along the way, but if that's what they're getting out of it, then I think you can rest assured that you are doing a good job. So just recognize that you needn't hold everyone to the standard of the one-page emails that some clients will send, but at the same time, you shouldn't hold those clients that do communicate a lot to the standard of the people who don't either, because they're just getting what they need to out of the service. So
yeah, again, it's obviously going to change over time. Like you might have some people at the start, they're sending really, really detailed, loads of questions, but then you've been coaching them for 3 months, 6 months, and their emails just turn into these like, yeah, great week.
Yep, great week.
You're like, cool. So, like we've got everything sorted out, you know. And again, like it says, like coaching style as well. Like again, this may be the way you do your training programs or all that kind of stuff. But again, like you just have to explain to them like why things are set up that way, or why things are set up the way they are set up, you know. And again, maybe you have to modify your coaching approach. Like again, you might have a program like this is the program I use for males that have been training for 2 years and, you know, want to gain muscle. You're like, this is the rough outline. You know, maybe it's modifiable because this guy can train 4 days and this guy can train 5 days or whatever, and you know, whatever it is, you know. And you're like, this may not work for that individual. You may have to actually adjust that and go like, okay, well, I have back off sets and top sets and all, and this guy just really doesn't like that. You know, it doesn't work for him. You know, so then you have to adjust your training program and coaching style to actually accommodate that individual. You know, and maybe that's something that you don't know how to do, and it's something that you need to upskill in. You know, so again, like Gary said, you have to assume it's your issue, not theirs.
It's good stuff. 2 good ones that go together here. I think like people like hearing this stuff because they're like, ooh, they feel like they're getting secrets. Patty, what's your favorite book and your favorite podcast? It doesn't have to be your actual favorite, but just like something you like that you think people should engage in with.
Favorite book? It's probably Alexander Solzhenitsyn's fucking Gulag Archipelago. Just because it's probably the book I've read the most.
It's pretty fire.
It's pretty good, like. Well, it's pretty fucking terrible.
It's pretty horrible, like.
But
good all the same.
Yeah, it's probably that as a book. If you're talking like health and fitness,
there's not many really like books.
I don't know, like it's kind of hard to like. I just like a biochemistry textbook. Like that's my bias. Leninger's is the one I use. Just putting it out there. That's lit. Leninger, as the Germans say. But yeah, that'll probably be my favorite book. And in terms of podcasts, I'm liking Eric Weinstein's The Portal. That's savage. I'm enjoying that. That's only like recent enough.
Yeah, there's like 6 episodes.
I listen to some Joe Rogan episodes. You know, like depends on the guest that's on.
Probably listen to like 1 in 5 maybe.
I probably listen to more than that because I like like anything to do with science. I'm like, yeah, I like that. Anything to do with diet and nutrition, I like it because it's also different perspectives, even if I don't agree with it. I don't like all the comedians and stuff like that, or the famous people. I'm like, I honestly don't care that you can play the guitar. Like it doesn't
Great
enthuse me. Like I'm sure this really gives a lot of people enjoyment in their life, but does nothing for me. I like some of the MMA ones. Like I like say Cowboy Cerrone and stuff are on, but like some of the people I'm like, just really couldn't care less that you are now the new fly fucking featherweight interim champ. I'm like, I don't care. You know? So yeah, some Joe Rogan episodes. I like Jordan Peterson's one as well. Don't always agree with him on all the stuff, but like again, I like things that like think deeply, ask questions, and talk about philosophy. I do like history as well, although a lot of history podcasts are pretty fucking shit. There's a few that are good, but they just don't come out with episodes very frequently, so I end up just not listening to them. Other than that, obviously this podcast.
The Triage, not the podcast, obviously.
But yeah, I don't really listen to much like health and nutrition, fitness, whatever podcast stuff. Apart from obviously on Joe Rogan, whenever there's people on for that. I'm like, it just doesn't enthuse me. I'm like, I'd rather learn like first principle type stuff. You know, I'm like this. I don't really care about your new protocol for whatever. It's just a protocol. I'm like, you're not gonna like. It's not the fucking hardline stuff. I'm like, that either comes down to like, you know, exercise physiology or, you know, biochemistry, nutritional biochemistry. So yeah,
Decent. Book, maybe Man's Search for Meaning. It's pretty lit, by Viktor Frankl. I think he was a doctor. Was he a doctor or psychologist?
He was a psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist. Doctor or psychologist. In between. Psychiatrist. He was a psychiatrist who was basically in the Nazi concentration camps. Like, not exactly the soundest place to exist, but lots of good, decent psychological, philosophical insights in there, and it's actually good. Like, even anyone that's into like health, healthcare, like anything like that, anyone who's at an existential crisis, I think it's good to just listen to stories from people who've been in fairly horrible situations, and it's an easy read, short book, so that's good stuff. The Gulag Archipelago would be up there as well. A book I'm very glad I read. As for health and fitness stuff, again, like, I'm not into reading popular health and fitness books. I haven't really read any that I would like really recommend. If I have, it's on our recommended resource archive. So, like, if you've ever got questions about what podcasts or books or articles you should read, like, there's a big list there on our website. In terms of podcasts, one of the podcasts I've been loving recently is the BBC do these podcasts called In Our Time, and they have like science, history, philosophy, they do religion, all different topics, but basically they'll get like 2 to 3 experts from the field on, and they'll just talk about something like ridiculously specific, and the interviewer is like, he's the perfect interviewer, because as soon as someone goes like 3 seconds like left field, like on a tangent, he's like, whoa, no, back to the point. So, like, there's episodes on like penicillin, like enzymes, like just very, very specific things, and you do get a lot of them, so I quite enjoy.
Can't support the BBC though, because, you know, taxation is theft.
Fair.
And they require you to pay TV license, and of course it's British.
It's true. But yeah, on the In Our Time podcast, I'd actually recommend checking them out. They're pretty good. There's a few that might be peripherally related to like nutrition and health and stuff. Like, there's one on circadian biology, which is quite good, and enzymes, I guess, is relevant for sure. So there is a lot of stuff in there that's worth taking a look at. So
also, we should mention that there's 2 other Irish guys that do podcasts, and that's Danny Lennon and Dave Nolan.
Yes, I actually do. They're 2 of the podcasts that I would listen to quite regularly. I just listened to Dave's latest podcast yesterday with Hugh Gilmore. Hugh Gilmore is actually a psychologist, sports psychologist, but like is legit, as in like he's not one of these kind of like airy fairy up in the air, like says a lot but gives you nothing to take action on. Like, he's big into like stoicism and the application of that, and like building a culture within teams, and like a lot of practical stuff that I would like be a big fan of. So he's someone that's quite good. Well, it's Dave's podcast, but check out that episode. And Danny Lennon's podcast is great as well. Like, if you're interested in nutrition, like there's probably at least 3 to 5 episodes on pretty much every aspect of nutrition you could be interested in. So, like, the way I would view the purpose of any podcast is to gain an entry point into a topic. Like, for example, if you listen,
passive learning.
Yeah, you listen to a podcast maybe on a topic you're interested in, listen to 2 or 3 episodes, and then you're like, all right, this is what some of the experts are saying. So that I remember that bit, I remember that bit. Generally in the show notes there'll be links. Click on the links, read more about
Don't tell people do that, so I don't do that.
Read more about the author's work, and then you delve deeper into topics based on that. So yeah, other than that, I don't listen to that many health and fitness podcasts. I'd be big into actually both of us, I think. The Jocko podcast.
Oh yeah,
another one we didn't mention. If you don't listen to the Jocko podcast, that's also excellent.
It's weak if you don't listen to it.
It is pretty weak if you don't listen to the Jocko podcast. And yeah, I listen to the occasion bit of Jordan Peterson, a little bit of Sam Harris sometimes, but some of his guests I don't find that interesting.
Also,
he talks so slowly as well.
Always uses the thing where he's like, I'm a neuroscientist. You literally have a neuroscience degree, you have done no neuroscience in your life, so stop using that as like your entry point to be like, oh yes, I'm in neuroscience. You're not talking about conviction on this topic. So anyway,
that's fair. But yeah, no, he does get some good guests on every now and then. I just find his voice boring. That's the one thing I like about Jordan Peterson is like I always feel like he's on the verge of crying or screaming. Like, it keeps you awake. Like, so yeah, there are there are books and podcasts, and the other thing that kind of ties onto that then would be reliable sources of health and fitness information. So obviously we touched on a few of them there. There's a few other ones that would quickly come to mind, like Lyle McDonald has always put out really good stuff. Like his website is like a really messy archive of lots of different interesting discussions.
It's body recomposition.
Yeah, bodyrecomposition.com. And he's been writing for what, 20 years?
Yeah, he got in, like he was an early adopter of the internet.
Yeah.
So like he's been writing since the internet started. Well, which is really the 90s. Like the internet's technically been around for longer than that.
Yeah.
70s we'll say really came to prominence, but yeah, the 90s anyway. So again, his website has fuck tons of information on it. Like you said, it is a little bit messy, and there's like we'll say it's evergreen content, but it's not in an easily managed archive.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, this works to this, to this, to this. Like, you don't really have like an index that you can really like, this is the thought process, or this is how you have things. But if you have a thought around health, nutrition, fitness, whatever, he probably fucking wrote about it.
Yeah, you can just tell that like with all of his articles, it's like he read something stupid that someone said online, got pissed off, and decided to write like a 7-part article series on it.
Yeah, just because he was bipolar. That's why.
It's pretty much what happens. But yeah, as we said, the Sigma Nutrition podcast, Synapse Performance podcast, both good sources as well. Both of those also have blogs and put out some stuff that you might be interested in. What else would there be reliable sources? I like the Stronger by Science podcast as well with Greg Knuckles and Eric Trexler. I like their website as well. A lot of good stuff on there from...
I don't like their website.
I know you don't, but Greg and other authors who've contributed good stuff. Barbell Medicine as well are...
Just I was going to qualify that. The only reason I don't like it is because they'll say something that you could say in one line over an entire paragraph. I'm like, there is no need to basically say the same thing multiple times and make this article 10,000 words when it literally only needed to be 1,000 words, So that's the only reason I don't like it. I'm not saying it's bad information or anything. I don't like the writing style.
You're a minimalist writer.
Yeah, I don't like where it's like, okay, cool, yeah, you have supporting points, you have supporting documents, you have supporting like literature that you want to link, and I understand that, but it's like, you could say this in one sentence and then put a few links here. Like, I honestly, like, it's that simple in my mind. I'm like, I don't need you to do a recap of every single one of the studies that you're linking and tell me what they found, and then they found this. I can read the study myself if I want to get that information. I want to know the point that you're taking from all of this information. In my mind, that's what a blog is supposed to do. It's not like you're writing a scientific paper where you may have to do that. It's like, no, you're writing a blog for the lay people to understand, or even like your peers to understand. It's like, write the sentence, this is what you took from it, here's the supporting literature, this is what you think supports your point. You don't need to tell me that, like, this study had 41 people in it, so, I'm like, I can read the study. But yeah,
so yeah, Stronger by Science, reliable for sure, but Paddy doesn't like their writing style, so if
you said another one then after that, was it?
Oh yeah, Barbell Medicine, they put out good stuff as well on multiple different platforms, kind of spontaneously. Like, they'll have some stuff maybe for like a month and then they just won't post anything for ages, but generally they do put out good quality stuff.
They have real jobs.
Yeah, like, to be fair, like, Austin is like an actual internal medicine doctor, so it's like, alright, fair enough. But yeah, they do put out a good bit of content, good stuff on pain and rehab, would recommend, because they've got like a pain and rehab team at the moment, so they do like a pain and rehab podcast. And like, if you're not interested in like conversations about like philosophy that almost come across as being really pretentious, like, I wouldn't listen to their stuff. But as someone who's like just really interested in pain and kind of philosophy as well, it's like, yeah, I can get on board with it. But if I was the lay person, I'd be like, oh, shut the fuck up.
So you don't like that?
No, I do. I do.
The same perspective. You're saying you wouldn't like it from the same perspective that I don't like Stronger by Science website. I'm like, just stop talking shit and just get to the point.
If I was putting myself in like my 18-year-old shoes, I'd be like, God, this is painful. But love the podcast, love the guys. So yeah, they put out good content as well. I'm sure there's like tons of reliable places. Examine.com is generally quite good.
Although I sometimes get the biochemistry wrong, it makes my blood boil, but we can't all be perfect.
Yeah, but yeah, there's lots of other stuff online as well. Like, I mean, basic sciences and stuff. Like, there's actually a ridiculous amount of stuff online that you can just
Yeah.
you can actually learn your fundamentals from, like, even like the Khan Academy,
And
like such a simple
YouTube,
thing. Like,
just like whatever you're like, read something like, oh, glycolysis. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
YouTube is fucking a million videos on it, and you'll find one form that you're like, that clicks with me. You know, like you're saying, like Khan Academy, that could be one of the ones you're like, oh, this makes sense. You've done a visual representation, and makes sense to me. You know, so like there's so many resources out there that it's actually. This is what I always say, and this is just a complete tangent, so you can stop me if you think I'm talking shit. This is why I also think that eventually, like, institutions like universities and stuff just become obsolete, because it's like, what are you actually teaching someone that they couldn't find in a quicker time period themselves? You know, it's like, I can read the textbook, because that's what essentially lecturers do now. It's like, I'm going to give you a synopsis of this topic, you know, or these topics, and you have to go read this yourself, you know? And if that's their teaching style and that's what they're doing, it's like, well, why can't I just shop around and get the best teacher to teach me that on YouTube? They put their lecture up for free, and their teaching style is much better. They're using better props, they're using better images, they're using better language to explore that topic, or, you know, explain it and whatever. It's like, what are you actually getting from a university? Now, obviously, it's the actual certification or degree process, like the actual testing, and that's where I think universities will eventually go, where it's basically they're just end up like testing centers. You know, obviously that's not applicable for all the things like you're doing medicine. There is obviously, you have to actually do medicine to learn medicine, but for loads of things, it's like, well, all they're doing essentially is fucking whatever you want, childcare for 4 years. It's like, yeah, like, we're just going to look after you for 4 years. Like, most people are like, yeah, my first 2 years of my degree were worthless. I did nothing. You know, and then they're like, okay, the next 2 years were a little bit harder, and it's like, you just deferred your life for 4 years, when I can get all this knowledge that you gave me, and I could probably pass the end tests, the 4th year test. So I don't care no one cares where the knowledge came from. What they actually care is that you actually know the knowledge. So I personally think that universities and colleges and whatever are just going to be obsolete in some fields, and they'll just become testing centers. But yeah,
like a good example of that is like, we're doing anatomy at the moment, and like, anatomy lectures, in my opinion, pointless. Like, there's no point in having an anatomy lecture, because like yeah, there's the occasional lecturer you'll get who's really good at explaining concepts, but anatomy is barely about concepts, as in, like,
it's just factual information.
This is the shoulder, this is where the greater tubercle is, this is where the subscapularis attaches. Like ultimately, the best way of teaching that anatomy, instead of wasting 4 hours a week of lecturer resources, of students having to be there, go away and study it yourself, come back into the cadaver lab twice per week, and let's do practical stuff of actually looking.
Or even if you're like, that's even too impractical, be like, here, I developed an app that has all the muscles on it, basically the cadaver stuff on an app. It's like, yeah,
and we have access to that, Ackland's Anatomy,
yeah, and there's another one, what's that, 3D for Medical or something, whatever it's called. You know, it's like, this is just a better way of teaching. Like, here's a three-dimensional fucking thing that I'm like, here, click on where the insertion point is. Oh no, you got it wrong. You know, like the actual interactive things where people are actively learning the information that's presented in front of them. They're like, okay, this makes way more sense than just having someone stand there and be like, this.
So yeah, it does depend on the subject. Like, some lecturers do a really good job of like they'll, like, in some subjects like physiology, like, they'll explain to you like the history of this concept, like what the initial experiments were, blah blah blah, and they'll go around the topic. You can tell they have deep knowledge. But when it's something like anatomy, it's like, yeah, there's no reason that I need to listen to this person as opposed to just like reading the book or just looking at pictures.
Or again, looking up and having a free market ability to be like, this is the best person, you are the top in the world, as a lecturer, not necessarily as a researcher or whatever. Because loads of times you find that like they could be fucking unbelievable, like heavily cited researcher, but be a terrible lecturer, like terrible, you know. And it's just like this process is broken fundamentally, in my eyes anyway. But again, like, that's what we'll see if that play out over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
There you go, folks.
Any other ones that are quick? Because this is like, what, an hour or something?
Yeah, it's probably another hour now. But let's see, any quick ones. Will creatine inhibit a fat loss goal? No, it'll inhibit a weight loss goal. Like, for example,
maybe some people don't.
Potentially, some people, yeah. Like, I'm not taking creatine at the moment because, as I said, I have to meet a weight class, and I know that for me, it makes between about a 1.2 and 2 kilo difference. Somewhere between there, I don't know. Somewhere around there it probably makes that much of a difference in my weight. It's probably closer to a kilo, like realistically. But at the same time, it's like, right, is the benefit of the creatine worth the extra hassle of dieting further? Like, probably not in this case. As in, like, not for me at this point in that sport. For you, different question. But fat loss, like, I see no reason to not take creatine. Like, it's definitely beneficial in that, like, well, for some people, again, like, your muscles might look a little bit fuller because you've a bit more water in your muscle. You've got better performance, a couple of extra reps here and there, maybe, like, again, beneficial for maintaining your muscle. So it's probably only beneficial from the perspective of fat loss. I can't think of any downside.
Unless you kind of cycle on and off, it then just makes tracking fucking
hard,
pain in the ass. Like, but
so yeah,
that's not,
it will support your fat loss goal.
Yep.
If you're a weight class athlete, in some cases you might want to consider removing it. But again, it's also neuroprotective. So if you do any sort of striking sport, like if you're MMA or boxing, kickboxing, whatever, rugby, then you want to have creatine in there for neuroprotective benefits that could potentially, save your machinery over the long run. So there you go.
I should have done that.
Huh? He should have
done
done that. He wouldn't be the way he is. But yeah, I think that's most of the short ones. Like, some of them we kind of already touched on. Like, one of the questions is minimalist programming, 4 exercises per workout. Do you actually need more? I think we kind of touched on that peripherally, and that we said,
like, we talked about it before.
Yeah.
Like, what's the minimal effective dose? It's like, if you do like 4 sets even in a workout.
Yeah.
That's like, I mean, like, very good sets, 100% dialed in. It's like, that's a good workout for that muscle group, And again, it doesn't seem like a lot when you're used to doing like 20 sets per workout for that muscle group. But, like, you can make a lot of progress if those 4 sets are dialed in. Like, you probably would have to do more of a top set type approach where you're actually getting closer and closer to failure with those. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they all need to be to failure. Like, you could do 4 sets of an RPE 9 on all those. You're just near failure and all the tension was dialed in. But again, it depends on the overall approach. But yeah,
like 4. Like, this is 4 exercises per workout.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean,
we'll say
how many workouts, how many sets? Like, what's your training history? Like, that's probably the biggest question in a lot of these cases. Or 2 questions is, what's your training history, and what's your goal? As in, if your training history is that you've always needed, like, reliably over 5 years, you've always needed 6 days of training with like 6 exercises per workout, and you've always only responded to higher volume training, and you're continuing the path of wanting to maximize muscle mass, 4 exercises per workout 3 times a week, probably not enough. But if you're a person who's like, yeah, I've kind of been training here and there, like, bit here, bit there, never really followed a program, 4 exercises per workout, like, you're doing that a few times a week, like, that's a decent
like, I always look at it again, like, I'm like, you need what, 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, somewhere in that region for most people. I'm like, again, if you look at that, four exercises, we'll say they're all 3 sets, that's 12 sets per workout, right? If you just did a 1 body part workout, there you go, there's your fucking 12 sets for that body part. Well, we'll say you even do like an upper lower split, for example. You could do like a lower body day and have like 2 quad exercises, 2 hamstring exercises, and do that twice per week.
Yep,
again, it's still like 12-ish sets for that body part per week, and same with the upper body day. You do like whatever, 2 chest and 2 back, whatever. It's like, that's still 12 per week. Maybe you do throw in some fucking lateral raises as well, 5 exercises for your upper body, but it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, like, I rarely do more than 4 exercises per workout, to be honest. But again, that comes down to a question of goals. As in, like, my goal is not to maximize my muscle mass. Like, that's not the current goal. So it would be unfair of me to say that, you should just train twice per week, 4 exercises per workout. Because, again, goal dependent. But yeah, I think that covers like a lot of different topics in this episode and the last part of the Q&A. We do have a couple left over, so what we might do is touch on them in like future episodes just at the end, like, alright, let's answer a question, talk about it for 10 minutes. And yeah, if you guys enjoy the Q&A episodes, like, let us know. There's always an option to submit questions, like it's linked below in the description box, so you can just drop your question down below, and we'll get back to it, whether it be on a Q&A episode, if it's a quick one, or if it's a good question for a full podcast, we'll touch on that. If it's an episode or if it's a question we're like, oh God, I don't know about that, there's plenty of guests that we could potentially get on to discuss it. So never be afraid to request a topic.
You're dead right, Gary. I have nothing else to say except that I'm hungry.
Yeah, I'm starving now. So thank you very much for listening. As always, guys, services will be linked below. Group coaching, one-to-one coaching. Check those things out. The only other thing we were going to mention was that we are going to a seminar on November 18th and 19th, I think. And that's the Broderick Chavez seminar in Dublin. There's actually two of them. One's physique related, one's more sports performance related. They're going to be great seminars, and you can use Triage 20 to get 20% off. And the tickets are actually very reasonable for a seminar. I can't remember the exact cost, but like I've been on some seminars that have cost me like €300 to €500 for a weekend, and I think or a grand. I think this is about half. So yeah, check that out. Broderick Chavez. You'll find it on this. I think synapseperformance.ie. Like David Nolan is one of the organisers, so you'll probably find it there. If not, just Google Broderick Chavez Seminar Ireland, and you'll find it. So.
I think one of the England ones is sold out. So
yeah, London is sold out.
They are selling, so don't be like, oh yeah, I'll wait till closer to the event. I'm like, no, get your ass there, because the two of us will be there. I know a lot of people from.
Few people from the group are going as well.
Yeah.
Two Protestants. Oof. Gavin Cusack and Ben Heron.
You hate to see it, really.
Yeah,
two northies.
Two orange bastards.
But look, I suppose you can't. You can't hold it against them. Like, well, actually, you can.
Gavin Cusack thought he was taller than me as well. That's actually one of the things that people say to me when they meet me in real life, because I'm so famous. They're like, I thought you'd be smaller.
And also, this is because
then I feel like the Chad, but then you realise that he's actually 6'5".
Yeah,
so
that's because you stand beside me, so people assume I'm a regular height, and then you're just a midget. When in fact, I am actually just a giant. But yeah, you still are smaller. So.
Yeah, Paddy's like 5'11". Like that's pretty big. I'm 5'5".
5'3", I thought.
Oh, 5'3". Well, I'm not. My boots on.
Of course, yeah. Look,
that's it. We're just talking shit at this point.
6'5" and above master race.
If you're even scraping 6 foot like me, you're doing well. I think.
I don't think so. Like
moderate height master.
You struggle to touch the ceiling. You struggle to get things from like top shelf.
Are you serious?
See, you have to.
On
jump.
That note,
you have to jump.
Peace out, guys. Just remember that it is, in fact, too easy. Oh, do you know that's a white supremacy sign?
Oh, I know. Yes, that's why I thought you did it.